Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started for those of you in the back. Just to keep us on track, we're going to go ahead and get started so that we make sure that we have time to get through the program. I want to encourage people to continue to go back and get the food because we have lots of food. And then afterwards, there will be time for more socializing. But we want to make sure that we spend the time today honoring and acknowledging the excellent work done by our faculty. So as with most of our gatherings, we start with our land acknowledgement, recognizing that all of us at UW Tacoma learn, live, work on or near the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people. In particular, we are situated on the traditional territory of the Puyallup tribe. And as people on this occupied territory, we have a responsibility to acknowledge the land, the ancestors who have cared for this land since time immemorial, and all our indigenous connections today. In light of this history, let us take active efforts to partner with our indigenous community members and neighbors as we continue our work together as a community of learners, leaders, and educators. So I'm Sheila Edwards-Lang. I'm the chancellor here for those of you who I've not met. I am so excited for this program today. I want to thank the leadership of the Faculty Assembly, Ann and Watang, for their help putting this together, the Office of Community Partnerships, and the Office of Special Events for pulling this together. It's an exciting time for us to recognize the excellence in our faculty, and Andy's going to say a lot more about that later, but also to hear about the impactful work that they're doing, both here on campus and in community. We pride ourselves as an urban-serving university, and what that means in actuality is that our faculty are doing the work of making those connections out in community and then translating that in their classrooms and helping students make sense of whatever it is that they want to do after they leave us, but giving them meaningful experiences both in the classroom and outside the classroom. And the faculty that we are going to recognize today have reputations for doing that exceptionally well, whether it's through the vehicle of doing research, or teaching in their classrooms, or community-engaged learning. So I'm very, very proud of what we're going to hear today and looking forward to it. So with that, I will ask our Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs to come up and give some welcoming remarks as well.
Thank you, Sheila. And thank you all for coming here to help us celebrate these four faculty today. Sheila promised that I would have a lot more to say, and I'm going to put you all at ease and say that I have a little bit more to say, because you probably didn't come here to hear me. This award ceremony comes at a particular time in the academic season for me, since the tenure and promotion process starts bringing files to my desk in November, I think, and then runs through the end of January. And so that gives me a perspective on not just the award recipients, whose accomplishments we will hear about shortly, but about the broader body of faculty work that sustains the academic life of UW-T and contributes so much to our students and our community's growth. And as I've thought about what I would want to add today, I've been thinking about the last 3 months of reading that I've been doing in people's files, reading hundreds of peer observations, external review letters, student testimonials, and the moving self-reflective narratives of our faculty as they describe their journeys of growth as teachers, as scholars, and citizens of the academy, both here and around the country, and in many cases around the world. So I find myself truly unable to fully express my appreciation for all the times a faculty member has connected with a community agency to create an internship opportunity, all the times a faculty member has sought grant funding to advance their scholarship and their students' experiences, all the times that they have persisted with an ongoing and impactful research trajectory that in some cases spans decades, decades of energy and creativity. All the times that a faculty member has been dissatisfied with how a class is going and reinvented that class or an assignment or a teaching approach just to make it better. Now, I say all this not to diminish the achievements and our recognition of Allison Cardinal, Luna Zhang, Ellen Baer, and Emma Rose. Quite the opposite. These are the ones we celebrate today out of an amazing, inspiring, and accomplished body of their peers. They shine bright, even in a galaxy of stars. So thank you. Now, that was the close. I see the timing was off on that. That was my close. Now, it is my pleasure, and I'm not sure who is going to make this happen, but it is my pleasure to introduce Ali Madaris and his video treatment. So thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to be with you for a few minutes to talk about the important work that our faculty do in the area of community engagement and the partnerships that they build. We are from, we are by, and we are for communities. And in many ways, the amazing work that our faculty and staff do to continue and sustain that connection is fundamentally important to who we are and how we function. Our Office of Community Partnerships was created to support, sustain, and expand the relationship between our campus and our communities. And in many ways, as we have looked at the data for across the multiple years that we have been looking at the work that faculty have been doing, we are honored to be a part of this process and be of support to our faculty and to our staff and students. We learn within our classes, we learn in our communities, and our scholarship is dedicated to fulfilling our relationship, which is with the communities, which allows us to sustain and grow as a region together in all areas that improve the well-being of everyone and our communities collectively. The examples that you do see today from Dr. Allison Cardinal and Dr. Emma Rose are the best examples that we can think of how to illustrate engaged scholarship and its service to our communities, and how our faculty members and students benefit from this work. We are honored to be a part of this. We thank our colleagues, Dr. Allison Cardinal and Emma Rose, to be with us today. And I'm sorry to miss this presentation, but I'm sure that you will enjoy the work that they have done. And please consider this, that the Office of Community Partnerships is a part of what you do, and we are here to support the work that you do. Please feel free to contact us anytime we can be of support to you. Thank you, and I hope you have a great event.
Great. And now for the main event, the reason everybody is here. I am so grateful for the insights, and we're very appreciative to Dr. Lang, Dr. Harris, and Dr. Modaris for welcoming us and welcoming our awardees. My name is Ann Taufen. I'm here as the Vice Chair of Faculty Assembly to introduce our distinguished faculty award winners. I'm a professor in the School of Urban Studies, where I have developed and implemented 2 new degree programs over the course of my career here. Our undergraduate degree in Sustainable Urban Development and our graduate degree in Community Planning. And I was also the first junior female faculty member with young children pre-tenure, if you can believe it. Feels like a long time ago, but I'm glad to tell you that I was able to educate my colleagues about walking the talk, of supporting different forms of diversity on our faculty. Although, as is often the case, and as I think we'll continue to learn from our colleagues today, we're not always happy or aware that we are far behind where we might have been or should be on these various conversations. I started the Urban Forum that initiated our urban serving campus designation and served to bring together faculty, community members, and local leaders on issues of local and regional importance for 10 years through the School of Urban Studies. And I was faculty co-director of the UW Livable City Year program in 2017-2018, making sure that our faculty here at UW Tacoma, our courses and our students were represented in a partnership year with the city of Tacoma, rather than leaving this to our colleagues from UW Seattle. The success of this initiative led directly to the creation of the Office of Community Partnerships the following year, and we are very glad and grateful for OCP's co-sponsorship of this event and the leadership of Julia Smith in bringing us all together. Recognizing faculty colleagues as one of the most important things that we are able to do on a university campus. It embodies and actualizes our values of solidarity, mutual respect, humility, and service, demonstrating that all of us are standing alongside and on the shoulders of others, and providing joy and genuine delight at the accomplishments of others in our midst. Knowing, as we do, how much labor and investment and perseverance and love are required to generate these achievements in knowledge production, in service to our students, in support for our local and regional communities, and in growing the footprint and recognition and esteem of our urban serving campus. It is my pleasure to introduce each of our Distinguished Faculty Award winners today. We're going to start with Dr. Luna Zhang. Luna Zhang is the winner of our Distinguished Research Award from the Milgard School of Business. Her talk is entitled, "If Platforms Are Exploiting Producers, Is Platform Competition the Solution?" Dr. Zhang is the interim director of the MS in Business Analytics program and an assistant professor of business analytics. I'm going to talk a little bit about your bio. Her research interests include consumer behavior, mobile commerce, platform economy, revenue sharing, business analytics, large-scale data analysis, and information systems and operation management interface. Dr. Zhang's current project focuses on consumer search and purchase in mobile commerce and revenue sharing in the platform economy. She won the Best Paper Award at the Conference on Information Systems and Technology, CIST, in 2021. Dr. Zhang previously taught Introduction to Information Systems, Demand and Supply Chain Planning, and Money, Banking, and Financial Markets at Lehigh University. She teaches various topics in analytics and operations management for undergraduate, Master of Science in Business Analytics, and MBA programs. She has received the 2020 Students' Choice Voting Outstanding Faculty Award at the University of Washington, Tacoma. She has led the Analytics Innovation Student Club as a faculty advisor, who went on to win the 2020 Informed Student Chapter Annual Award, cum laude. I give you Dr. Luna Zhang.
Well, thank you, Dr. Toffen, and thank you, Dr. Land, Dr. Harris, and Dr. Moderators, and thank you everyone for coming and having me here. So first of all, before I start my presentation, I would like to extend my gratefulness to my wonderful school, Milgard School of Business. I cannot make it here without the support of my wonderful school, from the Dean Merchant and also Associate Dean Cao, and also my wonderful colleagues who always support me. There, Shanini there as well, and also, my wonderful co-authors. I cannot make this just by myself. So I just want to give you a little bit, background about myself, about what I do as a researcher. So mainly my research interests are twofold. The first one is the firm's operations on consumer search and purchase. I started this journey when I was a PhD student, and I was absolutely fascinated with how consumers behave in the online and offline world. So I studied the front end about how the firms reach out to the consumers. For instance, using call center, I'm pretty sure that everybody has some wonderful experience about waiting for like an hour to get the call through. So I was the expert doing that, and you can ask me anything about the call center. And I am also, researching on how consumer purchase between online and offline world. So most importantly, recently, when you teach the Gen Z, they are always on their phones. I also study how they behave on the mobile commerce there. So how to search and how to make a purchase on the mobile commerce as well. And of course, I have some supply chain management background, so I would like to dig deeper into the back end of this, all the firms, to look at how they manage their operations management and supply chain management to make, the shelf, filled with like tens of thousands different, items on the shelf. So this is really some back end work. So recently, I started my journey, especially during the pandemic. I've started a new journey on my research interest. I started to study the platform economy. So platform, you can think about that like most of the high-tech companies, they offer platforms to match the consumers and the suppliers. For instance, everybody's favorite Amazon, like, every day you purchase from Amazon. Actually, Amazon do not sell, most of the time, they do not sell everything. They just match you with a seller so that you can purchase from Amazon. And also from Apple or Google, if you want to download the app, of course, Apple and Google will develop some apps, but most of the apps are developed by the third parties. So I really want to dig deeper, and especially we are in the Pacific Northwest, and we are the home to Amazon and what else? Microsoft. So I want to understand, how those platform economy impact our daily life as well. So this paper actually is, I really want to highlight this paper, one of my most proud working paper right now to you guys. So the title is, If the Platforms Are Exploiting Producers, Is Platform Competition the Solution? So I have my wonderful colleagues from University of Houston and UC Davis, and it's very fascinating journey because actually the last co-author, he was on the public hearing and the state capital of state of California about platform, how do platforms protect consumer privacy, and some thoughts on that. So basically, the platforms, not only including everybody's familiar Apple and Google, Amazon, but also a lot of people like to order online for food. So the food delivery platforms as well as the ride-sharing platforms. So basically, those platforms do not own any products or services. What they do is that they provide a marketplace to match the consumers or suppliers. So the suppliers can be any third-party sellers, or even a driver for Uber Eats, Uber, Lyft, or even like some, game developers that, you can download the game from. And recently, everybody's talking about OpenAI, ChatGPT. So those platforms also include the ChatGPT because a lot of the platforms, they make a revenue by charging the producers or the suppliers a commission fee. Right. I know that some people have some experience selling on Amazon, so you know what I'm talking about. So in the future, we believe that OpenAI will also use the same business models. So that actually apply to any type of the platform you can think about. So actually, this is a series of the research here. Is that I'm not sure how many of you heard about the big lawsuit from Epic Game to Apple 2 years ago. I know the gaming company, I'm not sure, like faculty people may not play games, but if you talk about Gen Z students, oh my goodness, they spend tons of time on playing game and they know about this, right? So one of the biggest provider of the games is Epic Games. So Epic Games is a stellar producer on Apple. However, Apple charges 30% of commission. So if you think about this, every dollar Epic Games makes, like 30 cents will go to Apple. So of course, Epic Games is not happy, and then they sued Apple about this high commission fee and also about Apple's monopoly power there. So 2 years ago, we started this journey to examine if the platforms reduce the commission rate from the standard 30% to 15%, what will happen? Right. So we end up a very productive research project, and then it is published in one of the top journals in the management science. So nowadays, we still have a lot of questions, even though that the platform actually, including Apple and Google, reduce their commission rate from 30% to 15% to specifically small producers who earn less than $1 million in revenue. But again, when you take a Lyft, when you take a Uber, sometimes you can see, the driver's app and your app, and then when you compare, sometimes you pay $20 for the driving service, and the driver can only receive $8, which means more than half of the money goes to the platform. And this is so fascinating because, as a consumer, we can not only choose Uber, but also we can choose Lyft, right? And people always talk about, competition is so good, and competition is the solution for the monopoly power. But still, when you talk with the Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, they complain all the time. They don't make enough money. Actually, a lot of them quit their job because their job as a Uber driver because of this high commission fee. So we really want to understand what is going on. Even though we have competition between platforms, why do we still see such a high monopoly power there? And if you go to White House website, and they also say, competition is a solution for everything. They can provide a better workplace and also provide more benefits for the consumers. But what we observe is totally different case, right? So, that's why we want to understand how does competition affect, the platform as a whole economy, what will happen to the producers, and what will happen to the platform as well. So I will really want to skip the nitty-gritty mathematic details because I know my student won't like it and you probably don't like it either. So I'll just go to my key findings. So after my talk, perhaps you will remember something from what I said. So basically, we observe, we find that the competition can decrease the participation. So imagine that, like I said, a lot of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, they quit being a Uber driver or Lyft driver because of the high commission fee. And we actually find that the competition is not a solution for that type of participation. And even with not only Uber, but also Lyft, and also for the food delivery platform, not only DoorDash, Uber Eats, right? And you have some niche delivery platforms, the competition sometimes can reduce the participation and also reduce the revenue sharing rate that goes back to the producers. So this is very shocking to what we usually think about the competition's effect. So actually the culprit is that the competition can cause the producers to spread higher costs across the smaller markets and also lower revenues. And we find that the changes in the revenue sharing rates are not necessarily informative of the health of the platform ecosystem. Even when the revenue sharing rate increases, the profit can decrease. And the participation which not everybody think about, is actually a very meaningful metric of evaluation. And we find that the competition can improve the producer profits when it increases overall ecosystem revenues. And however, the majority of the welfare gain can go to the platforms and the degree of producer heterogeneity, which means that, some Uber drivers, they are very efficient. They know how to drive efficiently. Like, for instance, they may have a Prius that can dramatically reduce their gas expense compared to some very expensive producers. They drive, I don't know, like Maseratis to provide the Uber service, right? They have a huge cost. So basically, those things that nobody is considering actually provide, plays a huge role in determining how beneficial competition can be for the producers. So before I go, I really want to, give you some idea about why this is happening. So revenue sharing rate is something that the producers can, get back home, right? Take back home. Then actually, when the platform provide a larger revenue sharing rate, the platform itself will earn smaller revenue for themselves. So if they smaller revenue, then it's actually they want to reduce the revenue sharing rate so that the platform as our standalone business, they can make some money. However, when there is more revenue sharing rate, then you will see more Uber drivers, Lyft drivers. There will be more participation too. And when you see more participation, actually then increase the demand, right? Why do you choose to use Uber and Lyft in the very first place as a consumer? Because it's convenient. Every time when I request, I can find a service rather than I'm not sure. I've never seen a taxi in the Pacific Northwest. So, so you can see this totally two opposing driving forces that drag the game like this. So I also want to give you some like concrete examples. Then you will find, oh, actually my paper can explain why the world is like this. For instance, if you talk to the Gen Z students, they are familiar with Switch, Xbox, PlayStation, and they have a bunch of different choices. However, if you talk with the game developers, they will say, actually, you know what? I still have to pay 30% to the platform for them to list my game, right? So the reason is that actually this platform, they have some differentiations between those game developers on different platforms, but also each and every developer, they have a huge cost. So if you talk to the Xbox game developer versus PlayStation game developer, they will tell you it's very hard, even though you have what is the game? One of the most popular game my husband always plays, FIFA, right? Actually, FIFA, even though it's the same across PlayStation or Xbox, but if you talk with the developers, they will tell you it's completely different channels, even though it's the same game. So this is a high cost that we should not ignore when we consider the health of the platform economy. Another thing is that everybody's on their phone all the time and downloading some fascinating, apps. And we have the Google and we have the Apple. Why still the app developers still need to pay 30%, right? So the reason we find is that, actually those two platforms are differentiated because for consumers, it's very hard. Let's say I have an iPhone and tomorrow I will have an Android phone. It's not gonna be possible. But there is also like quite some the cost then to develop for the different platform. That's why still you see that we have a lot of platforms competing with each other. They still charge a high revenue sharing, high commission rate from the producers and lead them to some endless lawsuit with Epic Games. And next time, I'm not sure who is going to be suing them. But anyways, so basically we find that, to solve this problem, platform competition alone is not the single solution that we can solve this problem. And we really need to think about the different costs, different type of the producers can bear, right? So for the Maserati guys, I don't know, maybe we can reduce their purchasing cost of a Maserati to provide a service to the Uber or Lyft market. And for the app developers, or even some influencers, right? So for the startup influencers, they may have no idea about how to create a video, because I'm teaching social media analytics, and I know that even though my students are willing to consume TikTok all day, every day, but they have no idea about how to create a quality video there. So this is where, the regulators can kick in, or even the platforms can kick in to help those developers, especially the high-cost developers, to reduce the cost so that everybody can benefit from this platform competition. So that's all for my talk, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Luna. I have to say one of the nicest things is to learn more about other people's research and the cool things that are happening. And I want to follow up with you about co-production, the private and public sector. So thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Ellen Bayer, who won the Distinguished Teaching Award from the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences. Ellen's talk is entitled Take a Hike, Finding Nature Where You Are. Dr. Bayer's professional research and teaching interests center on environmental literature and pedagogy, and her passion is to help empower others to access and engage with the natural world. Broadly, Dr. Bayer's work approaches the arts and humanities through an eco-critical lens and examines the role of natural and built environments in the range of texts that she studies. More specifically, her scholarship explores the ways in which human desires and aesthetic preferences impact the natural world and considers the environmental consequences of our personal preferences. With the aim of reaching a broader audience, Dr. Bayer shares her work in a variety of formats, from academic and literary journals to interdisciplinary sustainability workshops to podcasts and live storytelling events. In terms of teaching, helping students connect with the natural world is at the core of her pedagogy. From writing grants to fund excursions to Mount Rainier National Park, to developing a gear lending library and spending free time out on the trails with students, Ellen Bayer views helping students develop the skills and confidence to venture into the natural world as the cornerstone of her job. As her observations reveal, I'm going to read the whole thing. We're celebrating you. As her observations reveal, not only can this be a transformative experience for students personally, but having firsthand experience in the natural world also fosters new engagement with issues of sustainability and the global environmental crisis. Dr. Bayer is in the early stages of developing a new project that will collect and analyze data in order to discover if there are correlations between having a firsthand personal experience in the natural world, such as going for a hike or sea kayaking, and a deeper sense of engagement in and commitment to addressing issues of sustainability and the global environmental crisis. In other words, Dr. Bayer wants to explore whether humans tend to care more about conserving and protecting non-human nature if they make physical contact with it. Emerging research suggests that correlations do exist, and she would like to invite students to help contribute to this growing area of inquiry. Dr. Ellen Bayer.
Thank you for that nice introduction. Okay, so we're going to go on a little hike through the evolution of my pedagogy here at UW-Tacoma. My classes that I primarily teach are environmental literature classes or place-based literature classes, and I'm going to kind of show you how this has evolved and in response to the students here at UW-Tacoma. So my first year here was 2014, and in an environmental literature class, a student stood up during class, during our conversation, and she kind of gestured toward the direction of Mount Rainier, which you can see from parts of campus. And she had this kind of warble in her voice. She was very emotional. And she said, "I've looked at that mountain every single day of my life, but I've never been to it. I've never had the chance to touch it." And that just floored me. I had just recently moved here, and within a couple days of moving here, I was like up on Mount Rainier touching the mountain. And I had come here from, I had taught at a private liberal arts school in rural Indiana that had a lot of resources and support for getting students outside. And so I think I really was blinded to the amount of privilege that goes into that, and also how access is not something to take for granted. And as I started to talk with my students here, I came to learn that a lot of our students here at UW-Tacoma had never even been on a hike before. And this is for a lot of reasons. Some of it relates to access, time, support, resources. Some involves people not feeling like someone who looks like them goes out on the trails. Maybe people didn't have community or know like what pass do I need or anything like that. And so after talking to students, I really started to see how widespread this was among our campus community. And so during that, that first quarter, I just realized like this, my mission is to get students to go touch the mountain. And that's where I started. So that was the initial mission. Let's go touch the mountain. But that was going to take some time because I didn't have vans or, I didn't have a way to get students there. There's entry fees. Our students live very busy lives. They have kind of full-time lives outside of school. And so I was trying to be aware of that as well. So I started small and started close. So here we have a couple examples of some class excursions we took in the next couple of years. On the left here, this was in my space, place, environment class. And a student had mentioned she'd lived here in Tacoma all her life, and she'd seen Vashon across the water and had never been there. So we decided, all right, we're going to Vashon. And people brought their kids, they brought their dogs, they brought their partners. Like, we just made it a big event, and we took the ferry across and explored Vashon Island. Another place, this is on the right here, this is Owen Beach at Point Defiance. A lot of our students have never been to Point Defiance Park, even though it's just right down the road. And so that became another go-to place. And the assignment I would give them there was to just saunter, just take it in and walk around. And we found clams and interesting rocks and saw harbor seals and even sea lions. And it was just kind of amazing. You know, I would go to Point Defiance Park like multiple times a week to go run or whatever. And, you know, it made me kind of see the park through my students' eyes and see like what a treat and an event it was for them to go there. And so it started to help me realize, like, okay, we don't have to just go to the mountain. There's a lot right here for us to love and appreciate. So then the next step I took is I started to build excursions into my summer class. So on the left here, this is us hiking part of the Pacific Crest Trail up at Notches Peak up at Mount Rainier National Park. And then on the right there, this is students sea kayaking right out in the Theophos waterway. And so with the summer class, it was a smaller class. We kind of figured out carpooling. I learned that I could build in a fee for the class. The first year we went sea kayaking, I just paid for it because I didn't really know, you know, I still needed to learn a lot about how to make this stuff possible. So then I just kind of built in that course fee, and it was a relatively modest course fee, so it still made the class accessible. And with the summer class, since it's a big block of time, we had time to do these excursions during class. So that kind of took away some of the concern about students having time to actually do this. So finally, I'm trying to think now, I can't remember if this was in 2018 or 2019, but I applied for a Center for Leadership and Social Responsibility Community Engagement and Curriculum Enhancement Award and received it. And between that and getting an education entrance fee waiver from Mount Rainier National Park, and with a lot of help from Joe Lawless, who helped be one of the drivers of a van and help me get vans, we were able to finally take students to Mount Rainier National Park. And a lot of the students I don't think actually anyone in that class had been to Mount Rainier National Park before. And several had never been on a hike before. And so we have a couple students here. That day it was like whiteout conditions at times, and I was kind of fretting because I felt like, oh, they can't see the mountain and they're not gonna like this. And they're like, no, it makes it wilder. And so they were just so excited. And you know, I'll just share one little story that stood out from this adventure. I mean, there's a lot I could share, but I had had this student. He had recently moved to the Pacific Northwest. He was a refugee from Afghanistan, and he really missed his home village, which was in the Hindu Kush, which is a beautiful mountain range in Afghanistan. And he felt like he wanted to be in the mountains, but didn't know how to access them. And so when we got to Mount Rainier, at one point you could see the summit of the mountain, and he said, like, I'm going to the top. And I didn't want to tell him, like, we have 3 hours, like, you don't have the gear. You know, I was like, just be back at the van in 3 hours and, you know, we're good. And, you know, it was just so amazing to see his reaction he didn't get to the top, but he got far enough to be excited and to feel like he'd had a real adventure. And he ended up talking about that in his final project. A lot of these students kind of built this excursion into their final projects. So, okay, we touched the mountain. But then COVID came, and I had to totally rethink everything because, you know, well, we were all like building the plane as we were flying it and trying to figure out what teaching looked like when you're totally online and remote. And so during the spring of 2020 and the summer of 2020, I shifted my focus and started thinking about, well, let's find nature where we're at. You know, for part of that, we're in this lockdown where we can't leave our homes. And even after that, we're not supposed to travel far. Once it did start to open up, we weren't still kind of supposed to shelter in place as much as possible. And so I started thinking about, well, what are ways that students can connect to the natural world just looking out a window at their house, right? Or just walking around their block, and thinking about not going out far, not going out to the mountains, but like finding having the natural world meet you where you're at. So I'm gonna show you some pictures that students sent me over the next couple of years as I started realigning my vision toward finding the natural world like in built environments, in urban spaces. And unprompted, students just started sending me pictures of what they were finding. So all of these are student pictures. On the left here, a student made a terrarium from different mosses that he had collected on his walk. Another student decided he wanted to take pictures of birds and work on identifying them. So he found a kingfisher here. This was a park that was right by his house, which he never knew he could find, interesting birds there. The student found a bird in a park near their house eating a fish and got a picture of it. Another student did go out to Point Defiance and was really amazed by all the fungi. We had some students here who were bringing family and friends into their experiences as well. So instead of thinking of this as a solo experience, they started thinking about how do they bring their families and friends into it. And even one thing I talked with students about, there was some research that I came across that showed that even having like a fake plant on your desk or in your house can help brighten your mood, can help with depression and anxiety because of that like connection to the natural, even if it's a fake plant. So we started talking about just incorporating little things like that into our homes or spaces that don't entail having to go far, right? But bringing the natural world to us. We also started talking a lot about wildness, right? So wilderness is a location, and there's a legal definition of what constitutes a wilderness. But wildness is a state of being. And so I started to talk about this with my students a lot. We think of ourselves as living in this built environment that's completely human-made and controlled. But actually, even in Tacoma, we have lots of wildness. We have crows, they're not domesticated or trained, squirrels. We have, students started noticing like, wow, there's weeds or flowers coming through cracks that, nobody planted. Even coyotes seen in the city. And so that idea that humans and non-human nature do already coexist within built environments was kind of a revelation for them. And it started to help all of us see that we don't have to go far. And I think that was a big lesson for me as well, especially in 2020 when, I'm a person who spends a lot of my time in the wilderness, and to feel confined at first was really difficult for me and really bad for my mental health. And doing this project with my students, it helped me start to rethink my own relationship to the natural world as well, and to start to find ways to connect with the natural within my own built environment. For 2021, I was supposed to be on sabbatical, and I was supposed to spend my sabbatical on a project in Nepal, and that didn't happen, obviously. And so I had to rethink, like, what does my sabbatical wilderness project look like? And that helped me look more local. And I don't want to say I'm glad I didn't go to Nepal for my project, but I think it was actually really important for me to learn this along with my students, that I can find wildness right in my backyard. So then as we started to return to campus, I started integrating, and I had done stuff like this, but I started to make it much more a part of every single class meeting, that we start to work on engaging with the natural world right here on campus during class. So just building it into my class time. One day I will have students go out in teams, and they download apps on their phones, and they have to identify plants and trees on campus, and they get, a set amount of time, and then they have to come back and get me, and then they take me on a tour of the trees. They introduce me to the trees and plants on campus. It's just a way for them to kind of slow down and not just kind of walk past the backdrop of the campus, but actually be engaged with it. And then they start asking questions like, oh, well, this is a non-native species. Who decided to introduce that? Or why don't we have, more stuff here? And so they start to ask questions, and then they want to start to find out those answers to those questions. And so it starts to get them engaged on, their physical environment on campus in a new way. And then, sometimes we spread out a little bit further as well. So going over to the Theophos waterway. And I love on the left here, you can kind of see behind the bridge there, you can see, Mount Rainier kind of sticking out from the top. And so just thinking about the fact that we're in this built environment, but there's a waterway there, there's mountains in the background, we're still surrounded by it, even if it feels like we've cut ourselves off. We also have the Giving Garden on campus. So I usually find a way to take all of my classes to the Giving Garden. We taste the plants, and they get pretty excited about that. And we talk about which one was everyone's favorite, and talk about the purpose of community gardens and the roles that they've played in creating access to fresh produce in urban settings. And so there's a lot of ways that we can get out of the classroom and enhance what we're talking about in class by just walking around on campus. And then some of the stories that come through this as well. So in terms of the Theophos waterway, when you're talking about environmental literature and nature writing, the environmental crisis comes up a lot, and it gets pretty heavy and pretty depressing, and it can be hard sometimes for us to feel like, oh my gosh, how do we deal with this existential crisis? So I love taking students over to the Theophos waterway because initially it was an EPA Superfund site. I tell my students, barnacles would not even grow on the boats there. And if you know anything about barnacles, barnacles will grow anywhere. And so through a lot of effort and money, the Theophos waterway has been cleaned up. I mean, it's not a perfect waterway yet, but it's definitely improved, and people now can access it and use it as a recreational resource, and the barnacles have come back. And so, I show them this and we talk about it as a way to see a story of hope, right? Like a story of how human action and being proactive can make a difference. We also go over and visit the welcome figure in most of my classes as well, and talk about human relationships to the land and the Puyallup stewardship of the land that our campus sits on, and engage in conversations, whether we start by kind of talking about how we interpret what the welcome figure is kind of saying to us. And then we also kind of pair that with looking at different land acknowledgements and talking about how these work in tandem with each other. And so start to have lots of conversations about human engagement with the land and the water around us. So a couple things to kind of tie this all up. I wanted to rethink the books that I was teaching to better reflect this idea of finding nature where you are. And so I discovered this anthology called The Colors of Nature, Culture, Identity, and the Natural World. And it's an anthology of personal essays. It's all BIPOC or first-generation American writers, and it's approaches relationships with the natural world through a cultural lens. And by doing so, it really broadens what we talk about when we talk about nature writing. We're not talking about the kind of old canon of writers that were taught for a very long time, and students start to see their own experience in these essays, and it helps them see maybe that backyard garden is actually, they've had a really long-standing relationship with the natural world that they never really thought about, or their connection through food and their culture and how that connects them to the natural world, or relationships with non-human animals. And so it's been really transformative to have a textbook that can start to help students imagine finding nature where they're at. That then led me to develop my own book project. So also instead of my sabbatical project basically became this project. So I wrote a book proposal for an edited collection that would gather more strategies for outdoor experiential learning, especially in the arts and humanities, and particularly at urban serving institutions. And eventually I brought on one of the collaborators as my co-editor, and we produced, a book that I'm really proud of that collects so many exciting ways that people at other institutions are finding ways to address the issue of access, to think about how we can be more inclusive in engaging our students with the natural world and helping them have that outdoor experiential learning. So I'm going to leave you today with a few things that I do in my classes that I don't think you can only do in an environmentally focused class. I think these can have practical applications. And I have found that carving out class time or making things homework is a great way to just give students opportunities to connect with their environment. On the first day of class in all my classes, I send them out for 15 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, and they can't take their phone, and they don't have any job other than they have to just go out for 15 minutes. And they're like, well, how do I know it's 15 minutes? I don't have my phone. And I was like, you just have to feel it. And some people come back after like 3 minutes and I make them go back out. And then there's always the one person who comes back like a half hour later because they just really got into it. But with all of these, we always do a little reflection and a debrief. And it's the phone thing is really so interesting. Some of them are like, it was liberating. And for some of them, like, I was scared. And, we can kind of talk about those two ends of the spectrum and process that together. Sensory walks where the students go out and they experience the world. They focus on, all of their senses and, again, reflect on that or identify flora and fauna. Sometimes we go outside, out in the grass over here, and we just take our shoes off and stand on the grass and just see what that feels like or touch the grass. I mean, it sounds like really granola, crunchy, hippie, but how often do we just take time to connect to the physical earth? And so students kind of get a kick out of that. I ask them to go find wildness, whether on campus or if they do it for homework in their neighborhood. Sometimes I just say, just take a walk. You don't have to write about it. You don't have to report back. Just you go do it. And they do, I guess they have to report, they have to write, I took a walk, and then they get credit. But it's just a way to kind of incorporate that into their daily lives. There's a lot of research that shows that just a 10-minute walk a day can have immense health benefits. And what I find, if you help students start that habit, it becomes something they continue, and they let me know that's they keep doing this stuff outside of class. I mentioned going to the Welcome Figure or the Giving Garden or the Foss Waterway. These are ways to get our students out of the classroom, engaging with stuff that's, a 5-minute walk from our classrooms and helps them connect to the environment here. So I leave you with the hopes that maybe some of you will, even if just once, have students go for a walk. They really do find it refreshing because they're so overprogrammed, they're so busy, they're so connected to tech that just having an excuse to just turn their brain off and stare at squirrels can have a way more profound impact than I think maybe we imagine. Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker, I want to really express my gratitude for the Chancellor and for Andy Harris in co-sponsoring this event and Andrew Siebert's leadership in bringing it all together, and especially the Office of Community Partnerships, which is the location of these next two awards in community engagement. Carly Johnson and Julia Smith and their leadership in growing this office is really a signature program here on our campus and really enables a lot of us as faculty members to knit together our community engaged interests and vision and what we're told in graduate school you can't do in an academic career. A lot of us have managed to try to do or to actually do. We're going to hear from two awardees now who are doing it beautifully, is to knit together the basis of our interest in community challenges and opportunities with our teaching and with our research and publication record. Our first community engagement award winner, Dr. Allison Cardinal, is from the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences. Dr. Cardinal's scholarly expertise lies at the intersection of language justice, technical communication, and content design. In all of her work, she's committed to language justice approaches in her scholarship, in her community-based work, and in her teaching. Language justice asserts that all people should be able to fully and equitably participate in our communities and access services in their preferred language. Language justice fosters cultural vitality, autonomy, and dignity by allowing people to communicate without being stigmatized. Dr. Cardinal's work seeks to develop and practice ways of decentering English as the default way of speaking and communicating in our institutions to work towards equity for multilingual communities. Dr. Cardinal's approach to language justice comes from a technical communication angle. Drawing on approaches from UX, user experience, her work uses a human-centered design approach to create and share knowledge in both scholarly and community spaces. One of Dr. Cardinal's main areas of expertise is in research methods, especially approaches that use participatory research methods. Through these types of approaches, researchers collaborate with research participants to create knowledge and work together to collect and share what they find. Her recent research in this area has focused on the use of participatory video, where participants film their own environments to research multilingual communities and their language and literary practices. Her current major projects focus on language justice through community-engaged partnerships. She's currently the director of Designing Language Access, a cross-institutional and community-based research and consulting group. In collaboration with health professionals, civil servants, nonprofit professionals, and scholars, they are working towards systematically improving language access in the region. And Dr. Cardinal's talk today is entitled Language Justice, Community-Engaged Scholarship for Multilingual Communities.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to get to share my work with you and a new project that I have been working on. So thank you for that very thorough introduction. So I'll cover some of that and share with you some new stuff that I'm doing. That was a very long, you don't need to know anything else more about me. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the tree as sort of a metaphor for the work that I'm doing around language justice. So kind of think about language justice as the roots, and then all the ways that my work has grown out of that in multiple different directions. So Designing Language Access Group was part of it, and then I'm going to talk about how I've gone into AIDS and HIV clinical research as my new direction. So first, I think it's important to sort of establish what is language access and what is language justice. So when we think about language access, we can talk about it as providing limited English proficient people with reasonable access to the same services as English-speaking individuals. And I use the term limited English proficient very carefully because it does frame these communities as deficient. The challenge is that it is sort of what's used legally as categorizing folks as a protected class of people. So we've used it very strategically in our work with the federal government. So I just want to acknowledge that up front. So that's language access. So part of language access is a regulatory framework. So in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, it states that it prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin. And language is part of that, that the Supreme Court ruled. And it was further strengthened through Executive Order 13166 in the year 2000 that says that federal agencies need to develop and implement a system to provide those services so LEP persons can have meaningful access to them. So it tries to systematize this approach. So the question is, if we have language access already, why do we need language justice as a framework? So language justice, it helps engaging with multilingual populations, requires a proactive, comprehensive framework for doing this work, and it offers a philosophical and practical grounding for transforming how researchers work with multilingual communities. So just to give you an idea of what's the relationship between language access and language justice, I see language access as sort of those fundamental practical practices like translation, interpretation, and community engagement. And it's nested within language justice, which has a much broader social justice understanding of the role of language in communities having agency and empowerment in the US and globally. And it also acknowledges that language discrimination is a huge contributor to systemic discrimination for a lot of communities. So it places it in that much larger context of social justice. So when I'm doing this work and collaborating with community, we really want to think about moving away from minimal access, especially when we're working with federal agencies like doing clinical research, to language justice. So minimal access in a federally funded program might be checking the box on a requirement. Okay, we did a translation check, we can move on. Provides language services only when asked. And English is the assumed norm. So people who are English speakers are centered. Language justice, in contrast, it's social justice oriented. It recognizes that work around language is something that contributes to rectifying the injustices in our society. It requires proactive engagement with multilingual communities. You go to them. How do you want to be communicated with? What are the channels of communication? What do we need to do better? And then linguistic diversity is the assumed norm. So people don't have to approach for help. You actually have something there and assumed that someone, even if they speak English, for instance, they might be more comfortable in Spanish. It's not just necessarily about like immediate need. So I started this journey, Emma and I and Laura Gonzalez, we got some funding from the Office of Community Partnerships, thank you so much, to begin this very ambitious project, Designing Language Access. And it's a cross-institutional and community-based research and consulting group that we're working to improve language access in the Puget Sound. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking about this because I'm gonna pivot to talking about my other project, but I'm just super humbled by all of the people who contributed to this work. A lot of the issues around language access is not my own lived experience or lived experience in the community that I came from. So many folks from the state, the city, nonprofits, from multiple groups, different scholars in a lot of diverse fields contributed to this. So much, thanks and gratitude for these folks and contributing their expertise to this project. I'm happy to talk more about the things that we did together if you want to after this is over. Okay, so I'm going to talk more specifically about the Language Access and Justice Initiative that I'm currently the PI for through the Vaccine Trial Network. So I'm working with Pedro Goencochea, Rafael Gonzalez, and Michelle Andrasik, who are at Fred Hutch. And Pedro especially, he found the website that I had created for designing language access and just reached out to me, and then we met up, and he's like, I want to do more language justice stuff related to HIV vaccine trial stuff. Are you interested in collaborating with me? And I said yes, and he is just amazing. PrEP wouldn't exist without the work that he did in Peru. So doing clinical research there. So it's been really humbling and wonderful to get to work with these rock stars in this area. So the main problem we are looking at in terms of clinical research trials, Hispanic populations are underrepresented in all clinical research, and particularly in HIV/AIDS research, where Hispanics make up 30% of new cases, but only make up 12% of study participants. And this is a huge problem for the validity of the research, and for also making sure whatever research you're doing is engaging in these communities. They benefit from these researchers, from this research, so it's vital that we increase this participation. And we theorize that a lack of language access for these individuals, for monolingual Spanish speakers, is a major barrier to study participation. And there are research in the medical literature that bears this out. So that's why we became really passionate about this as an initiative. So we're partnering with the HVTN, and HVTN stands for the HIV Vaccine Trial Network. And it's an international collaboration of scientists, clinical trial sites, and community representatives working with governments and industry in the global search for an HIV vaccine with a goal of speeding the development and testing of HIV vaccine candidates. So 2000 to the present, here's all the different sites. Over 70 trials open. There's 100 clinical sites around the globe, and there's 49 current, and over 45,000 people have been enrolled in these. So the work that we're doing is gonna have a global impact on every continent but Antarctica. So they're not doing that there, okay. So what does the HVTN do? It conducts clinical trials designed to answer questions around safety, immunogenicity, vaccine efficacy, social behavioral sciences, and it all takes place through clinical trials in a network of global sites. So some of the work that we began in summer 2023, we ran several webinars on language justice for the CDC that were highly attended. And then in fall 2023, we ran some bilingual workshops, bilingual language justice workshops at USCHA in Washington, DC, and at the 2023 HVTN conference in Seattle. And those are some of the largest conferences around HIV and vaccines in the world. So that was really rewarding work to be able to do that. And so we had folks who were PIs, people who ran community-based groups come, and we discuss these issues. One of the things we realized, though, is we could make all the recommendations in the world, but if we don't have like a basis of like knowledge and qualitative research for what is actually happening in those sites, it makes it really difficult for us to make really specific recommendations for how to work towards language justice in clinical research. So our current research project, which we got a support from a population health grant to begin this, we want to understand the challenges that staff and clinical researchers face in enrolling monolingual participants in HIV/AIDS, investigate how clinical research sites use and employ language access practices and plans, such as translation and interpretation, to increase enrollment and retention of LAP Latinx people, and evaluate the effectiveness of language access practices currently used in education, recruitment, and retention for research participants in clinical research. So our methodology, which we're doing this spring, we're conducting 55 interviews with principal investigators, staff, and researchers across all regions in the United States. So it's pretty big, it's fun. I'm really excited to see what we're gonna find. And we're presenting our preliminary findings at AIDS 2024 in Munich, which is the largest AIDS conference in the world in July. So I'm really excited about that it's, we're thinking about it as having, an international impact on multiple places that work with multilingual populations. So the future impacts, what we hope that what is coming out of this research, we want to design trainings and modules to improve language access at these sites. We're going to do more collaborating with community groups to increase participation and co-sharing of knowledge. It's a huge problem that you're coming into these communities, you're extracting the data, and then you're not communicating back to them the benefits of what has been produced. Conduct pilot programs to implement new comprehensive strategies. So we're hoping to go collaborate with a research site in San Francisco to run a pilot program related to language justice there. Publications and conferences, take our findings to other multilingual sites, and then also this work is going to be featured in my upcoming manuscript, Language Justice and Communication Design. And I'm gonna co-author a chapter with Pedro and Raphael. So, and I just want to emphasize, thank you, UW, for giving me the cash money because I needed it so bad, and I wouldn't have been able to do this research without all of the institutional support that I've gotten. Ollie mentored me and gave Emma and I that first Faculty Fellows Award, and then from there we got a Strategic Initiative Fund grant, and then IAS gave us some money, and now I got the Population Health Initiative, and I'm also looking for more money, so if anybody has a spare dollar, I will accept it. But this, it really paves the way for the type of work that faculty are doing. So I was able to pay a lot of community partners, was a huge portion of this money to make sure they were equitably compensated. It bought me out of time so that I actually have the time to do this. for student undergraduate researchers. So also using this money to really see this as a reciprocal relationship with the community beyond just like, thank you so much for doing all this free labor for us, which is often what happens. So really trying to put our money where our mouth is for that. So when I look at this tree again, I'm like, I feel so humbled of all the like hundreds of people who like contributed their knowledge, their time and expertise to the work that I have done. From people who have like come to the workshops and people on Designing Language Access Group and people have been activists for decades. You know, this is not my experience, and just how to do this participatory way to make sure it's like reciprocal and impactful on the community is like so important, and I'm just striving to do better at that every day. So, thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Allison. I want to point out also that each and every one of our awardees has talked about all genres of their public intellectual work. They're talking about teaching, they're talking about community service, and they're talking about research and publication. And it's just really inspiring that none of us are really kind of separating those out. None of you are separating that out. And that is rare in the academy, and I think it's a really important hallmark of this institution. It's really inspiring. Our next award recipient of the Distinguished Community Engagement Award is Dr. Emma Rose, also from the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences. And you might also notice that these three scholars are from a clearly really productive and dynamic unit in the School of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Emma Rose's talk title is Community Engaged Pedagogy, Stories, Patterns, Possibilities. I do want to say also that Emma's bio is the shortest of anybody's, so it's not going to be quite as thorough of an introduction. And I wondered if that has something to do with her skill and expertise in recognizing that maybe we can't imbibe and retain a lot of information that we see online. I don't know, but I can tell you what I was able to find on Dr. Emma Rose's website, which is that Dr. Rose is a technical communication scholar whose research and teaching is motivated by a commitment to social justice and designing for inclusion. She uses participatory design and research techniques to help conceptualize solutions for community-based problems. She teaches user experience, UX research, user-centered design, and technical writing. Previously, she spent a decade working in user experience. Dr. Rose is an associate professor in the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences with an adjunct appointment in human-centered design and engineering at UW-Seattle. I also want to flag the fact that developing methods is a really key part of Dr. Rose's approach and agenda to engage communities and vulnerable populations in the design process. Dr. Emma Rose.
Thank you so much. What an honor. What an honor it is to be here and to be in community with these brilliant scholars. And when I look around the room, I see so many of our colleagues who have inspired us in this work. And so it just feels really, really precious to be part of this experience. So thank you so much. So I'm going to start with a story. So do you remember winter of 2022? We were in the pandemic, we thought we were getting out, but it was the Omicron wave. And I remember sitting at my desk at my home office being like, oh my gosh, how much longer are we going to have to do this? We had like emergency went online again, and we were kind of easing back to in-person. I was exhausted, and I think a lot of us were exhausted at that moment in time. And I almost remember the ding in my email when this email comes into my inbox, and it says, hey, Emma, we haven't met, but I would love to talk to you. And that email was from Julie Anderson, who is the auditor of Pierce County, an elected official. She was also running for Secretary of State for the state of Washington. And she said, and this is another connection, today is all about connections. She was like, I got your name from somebody at the city of Tacoma, which was because of Livable City Year. So she had reached out to me because someone said, Emma's the one you should talk to. So the problem she was coming with was acknowledging that the auditor our auditor's office runs elections for Pierce County. So if you've ever voted in Pierce County, you have used their information. And Julie knew that they had some brilliant people working on their information for voters, but she also knew that there could be some improvements. And she was like, I heard you're the one to talk to. And I was like, great, let's talk. So as they're responsible for all kinds of voting, they've got all kinds of information that help people vote. And we were talking and brainstorming, and I thought, you know, I've got this class. I've got this really fun class called Usability Testing and Research, and we always work with community partners. And I was like, I think this is a perfect opportunity for this project, my class. It seems a great coming back together, and we were coming back in person. And so she came to my class and wowed my students. They had somebody who had, you know, was running for elected office there talking to them about this problem. And while she was talking to them, I could almost see it in their eyes. I had 3 students in that class who just lit up with this topic. And she left, and they came up to me, and they're like, that's the project I want to work on. So this project kind of re-energized all of us, and I want to talk about it in context of my larger approach to community-based pedagogy. So I'll come back to that specific story, but for now, just to zoom out, Vanessa, thank you for sharing these objectives with me recently. Community engaged learning objectives, what we hope when we're having community engaged projects with our students is that they're learning these things along the way. Things like civic identity, cultural humility, perspective taking, systems awareness, and integrative learning. It's a lot, feels like a lot to bake into one little class, but I think we can do it. I have been working with 2 of my colleagues at 2 other institutions to create models for thinking about how we do this. Because I can say community engaged pedagogy, and I bet you all have a different idea of what that means. And so working with people in other institutions has allowed us to be like, oh, you do it that way, I do it this way. All pedagogy is local. All of it is contextual, right? We are informed by this place. We are informed by the city that we live in. So these models came out of some really productive conversations with Dr. So-Yun Lee and Dr. Heather Noel Turner. So the theory that we use is emergent theory from Anne Marie Brown. And I want to start with this quote that I feel like has been driving me in a lot of community engaged work lately, which is, there's a conversation in the room that only these people at this moment can have, find it. Like her point is, the collection of people and networks coming together, you might not always know what the problem is going to be or how to solve it, but the expertise in the room, that is the group of people who are going to help you find it. So I set out to do that in my classes, is to find that conversation that we could have in community and with community and bring the students into that conversation as equal participants in the process. So typically, maybe not typically, but oftentimes when we think of community engaged pedagogy, we think, okay, you've got a partner and you've got a class. And that's maybe a simple way to think about it. So we wanted to complicate it by looking at the models, creating models out of what we do in our classes. So this first one is from Dr. Turner, and she calls hers one-to-many. So this is the idea that you have a partner and you have a class, and then within that class you have multiple groups of students working on different kinds of projects for that partner. So her example, which is detailed in our paper, is talking about working with the Innocence Project in California. And it was with that one client, and then the different groups worked on things like search engine optimization, content strategy, working on instructions and design and things like that. So everyone's kind of focused on the same mission, but they're allowing them to build out different skill sets in their teams. So that's one model. So now my model, which we call many-to-many. And so this is how I typically run community engaged courses, and a number of my courses are, where I have multiple partners and multiple groups, and I'm the conduit to these different groups, but I'm also sort of my role is sort of like project manager, coach, facilitator, helping to manage these different relationships. So, and what stays constant is that we're learning about one method or one topic and we're applying it in all these different places. So in my usability testing and research class that I mentioned, this is what we do. We're almost like a little consulting group, right? We've got all these little clients and we work together to work on these projects. So going deeper into that project in particular, the partner, because when I look at this is even more calm than the actual projects are. Like in each one of these groups, there's another network and another network. It's like a fractal relationship, which is a part of emergent theory or emergent strategy. So the partner here was the Pierce County Auditor's Office, and there was multiple stakeholders that we were working with, and then I was the instructor, and then I had my 3 lit up students who were excited to work on this project. They were excited to work on this because, for a variety of reasons, but a lot of it was because of their life experience, their identity, the lens that they were bringing with them into the classroom was based on a lived experience where voting meant a lot. And I also think it was in a time, and continues to be in a time, where our democracy feels really, really fragile. So just like the barnacle example, when we see systems that aren't under strain and we're starting to feel sad about those things, the best thing that we can do is get involved, right? And look for those resilient systems and look at the ways that we can help with these systems. So the students conducted usability studies, they recruited participants. Pierce County specifically wanted to look at people new to Washington and young voters, so it was a perfect kind of match, I think, for our UW students. And they were specifically interested in people new to Washington because vote by mail is not available in every state, and so they wanted to see if the information they were conveying about vote by mail was trustworthy, right, was understandable, and that people could figure out where their ballot boxes were and things like that. So the students ran the studies. They did this just a very, very wonderful job. They found all kinds of things to improve. They found a lot of things that were working, but they found a bunch of things to improve as well. And this is them presenting. You can tell like by how many masks are in the room, I think of like what time of the pandemic it was. And this is them presenting their work. And in the audience is Julie and her team listening to the work. So they presented it. It's a research study, right? And they come out to present it. And then they make the rhetorical argument that kind of like everybody in the room kind of stopped to think about it. And the argument that they made is that they went back to an article we had read the previous quarter about literacy tests in the South during 1890s to 1965. This is a really wonderful article that looks at the different materials that people had to contend with when they were trying to register to vote in the South, and how even though on the surface they look neutral, they're intentionally designed to disenfranchise voters. And the students sitting there with this, the county elected officials were saying like, this is our history. And of course, our wonderful elected officials know this, but they were just blown away by our students. And when we talk about usability testing, it's often like, fix a link, change a heading. It feels really mundane, but the point they wanted to make in this very emotional way is that these mundane details matter. And so they did a lovely job of connecting their past work to this project specifically. It was also at the end of that presentation, they scurried out of the room and the client went out with them, and they were all in the hallway just lit up and just talking about it and what they learned. And the very next day, the client emailed me and said, we've already made all the changes they suggested. They were like, these are great. And they said, we want to work with them some more. Can we work with them some more? And that's what we all want, right? Like we want those relationships to exist over time and over space. So one of the students graduated, and yay for them, but 2 of them wanted to keep working on this project. Julie moved on as well, and so she moved on, but we had the original stakeholders there as well. Those 2 students did an independent study. They did another study to look at visual design, and they also did a comparative analysis where they looked at a bunch of other voting websites to see how it could be improved. So I come back to this as a model, and I feel like when I step back, this was like a particularly successful experience, but I feel like I have 5 of these a year, right? Where you see students, you see community, you see them coming together. It's not always easy. It definitely, as we all know, takes time, but it is so worthwhile. So did we hit those learning objectives? I would say that we did. We obviously went into civic identity, cultural humility, perspective taking, systems awareness, and integrative learning. The one other model I want to leave you with, because I really love it, is So-Yoon Lee, who is from the University of Texas, El Paso. And her model is called one to plural. And yes, there's still one class, or one partner and one class. Then there's different groups of students working on different projects, But then instead of sort of in isolation, the beautiful point she makes in this paper is that students are already in communities. It's not like we're introducing them to community when they come to college, right? And so her model has them look at an issue. In this case, they were building a makerspace on campus, and she wanted the different groups of students to go to their communities and say, what do you want? What would serve you? And so thinking instead of, as the way that Allison mentioned it, as like an extractive model, instead it's saying we're already in community, you are already in community and empowered to be the representative and engage your community and back into campus and the classroom. So I love that model as well. I want to leave you with a quote, again, from Anne-Marie Brown, because she's so very inspiring. And I just want to leave this because I feel this as we are here today in community. We can do, be, and create whatever we want to see, knowing ours is one effort in the midst of many, and the multitude is where our power lies. Thank you. Oh, can I just say one more thing? This just happened and I'm super excited. So these are the students who worked on the project at the bottom, and the first student there just got hired for the Center for Civic Design, which is a national think tank on how to improve voting across the country. And he got hired because of this project. So anyway, okay, again, and thank you so much.
Thank you. That concludes our talks from our award winners, and I would like to invite Dr. Elavie Nadura to come and offer closing remarks. I also would like to express my appreciation for Dr. Nadura's presence on our campus. I think that the growth of the Center for Equity and Inclusion has been one of the most encouraging aspects of the growth of our campus. And Dr. Nadura arrived after we had the hard data generated through our climate study of what many of us knew, which is that we have a lot of work to do in improving our climate and the practices of inclusion on our campus. So I'm especially appreciative of Dr. Nadura's characterization of the beloved community, and for all of us learning what that means in our context here and now. Thank you, Dr. Nadura.
Hi, in case you did not know, I become quite energized by research conversations. I say, oh, they're talking about research. But I get energized by many things. I'm always energized by community conversations, multitudes. That's where the power lies. So I'm also aware that I'm the bridge between research conversations and personalized conversations in those social hours, so I will be very brief. What I have enjoyed the most is the people, the community-centered approach to the research that has been summarized this evening in this room. Many years back, while at George Mason University, I was selected to spend a year at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars with other prominent scholars from around the world. I was the little one, George Mason University next to Harvard and Stanford and the Sorbonne in France and Oxford in Great Britain. So I was very humbled. And I remember we had to make presentations every week. We took turns as scholars to talk about the progress on the books that we were working on. And the first one was by a colleague from Oxford University in the United Kingdom. Very proud in my work, what I have done. At the end of the 20 minutes, I asked, "You really have done excellent work. Now, can you share with us what difference your research has made in the communities?" And he stood up straight, looked at me like I was out of planet Mars, and he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Where research of consequence is supposed to improve lives in some way, some shape or form, how is your research of dozens of years make a difference?" "Well, I'll get back to you next week." He did not have an answer. So for the entire academic year, whenever I raised my hand during those presentations, they didn't even let me ask the questions. They said, oh, I know what you want to know. I said, tell me more. Oh, you want to know what difference my research makes. So it became a culture change, just one question. The very famous Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. So I think the prompt on the card that I'm expected to address in just a couple of minutes is equity, a climate of equity and excellence. You notice that we have been championing a model, not just really talking about, hey, diversity is big, it's very important, join us, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when the rest of the country is fighting about DEI and, people being fired, people being questioned, we are just here dangling and smiling, just doing our work because we are pursuing inclusive excellence. The notion that we are all here committed to creating an environment, a campus climate, where every student, every faculty, every staff member will feel that they belong, that they are affirmed, and that they are supported in the pursuit of their academic and professional dreams. Knowing that they will come to any school, any office, and somebody will say, welcome, I got you. What are you interested in? How can we work together to realize your dreams? I was deeply touched this evening by the attention, the story from Dr. Bayer, providing opportunities to students to touch the mountain. That's profound. That's really symbolic, because as a first-gen institution, as an institution where most of our students identify themselves as students of color, an institution where the majority of our students are on some sort of financial aid because they really cannot afford to pay for college. Touching the mountain is what we need to do and what we are here to do every single day. Completing a course instead of dropping out in the middle of the quarter. Graduating at all odds. That's creating spaces that allow all of our students to touch the mountain, because the degree is higher than Mount Rainier. Some students look at it. Faculty, achieving tenure and promotion for some of us, who is higher and further than Mount Rainier. We look at it, we look at the expectations, and we wonder, I don't belong here. There is no way I can publish. There is no way students will listen to me and give me good evaluations because I speak with an accent. We come here shaky, wondering if anyone will realize that, in fact, we are smart, we are brilliant, we can do the work. We have to fight for recognition. So this inclusive excellence framework is profound. I was very touched also by the research on language justice. As a multilingual scholar myself, on good days I speak 4 languages, but I only publish in 2. French is my first academic language. And the importance of us as a university realizing that if we are going to pay for research projects or conferences with the small salaries we have, then maybe our children will not be able to eat. I understand because that's my story. I had to compete at a Research One institution, and I had to make tough decisions all the time. Okay, how do I pay for this? How do I pay for this? So creating a climate of equity and inclusive excellence require us to be intentional in our budget models. Andy, you heard me. He's not in charge of the budget model, but he's the, is extraordinary executive vice chancellor for academic affairs. So we all look at him, and how am I supposed to go to conference? How am I supposed to go around the world if I don't have the resources? So we have to be a little bit more creative and much more intentional in living our mission of equity and inclusive excellence. Creating a culture of curiosity, calling up somebody who's brand new to our campus, a faculty member from, let me call myself, from Burundi, and say, hey, you're here? What school are you in? What are you interested in? Oh, by the way, I have started working on this project. If you're interested, please tag along. I could use your expertise. This is how faculty groups and teams and schools succeed. Equity and inclusive excellence. But we can't go there unless we do what Dr. Rose reminded us, realizing that there is a conversation to be had. So in this room today and in all the classes, in all the faculty meetings, what are some of the conversations that we need to have in those faculty meetings that we have not had yet, but that we must have in order to advance equity and inclusive excellence? I'm intrigued. I'm so intrigued. Collaboration, it's one of our values. Everywhere, hey, collaboration. So that means sending an email to somebody, a Teams message, I have acculturated into Teams finally. Say, hey, I'm intrigued. I looked on our school website, and some time ago you wrote about something like this. Do you know that I'm interested in similar thing? Can we have tea or coffee or just water or some juice somewhere and a cookie? And discuss how our interests converge so that we can do bigger things together. Does that make sense to anyone? So, stopping by somebody's office, they say, hey, I have 20 minutes in between classes or in between my next meeting, and check your calendar. Do you have a few minutes so that we can walk without our phones to the waterway? Do you know how much good that does? This afternoon, I was privileged I have 15 minutes, so I did that on the water. That's my healing spot, the waterway. And I came back, and somebody who had noticed me said, oh, I'm glad you went for a walk. And I said, yeah, I needed it. And they said, I could tell you looked like you had just hit a wall. So I was not able to hide that I needed the 15 minutes at the waterway. I came back healthy. So when I showed up here, I was really good, the real LRV that you know around the campus. So let's make it a conscientious, intentional effort to walk together. Because when we go on a walk, we actually generate even more research ideas. Let's be curious in order to learn of and understand other people's interests and passions. Do you know that research is never tiring when we are investigating topics that we are passionate about? We stay up until 2 a.m. and no one realizes that. But when we're doing something because we have to, we have no commitment, we have no passion, it's a drag. So find your passion and work with somebody else so that we can elevate UW Tacoma in teaching, research, and community engagement, and elevate our quest for inclusive excellence. Thank you. I appreciate you.